Welcome to Dove and Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. I'm here with special guest and author, Sammantha Anderson. It's trying to rush your name and it's not going for it today. So
I understand. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Now you have the Hellborn series and there's currently 5 books.
Yes.
So where did you come up with the idea for book 1?
I had started to want to write again. I just moved to Colorado with my ex-husband and it was time to start writing again. And so I found a writing prompt on Pinterest, believe it or not, and started writing. And the writing prompt I found, here came Savannah and Damien were the first 2 that came. I changed the scene slightly, but I ended up using that scene in book 1 and I just kind of ran with it. And the next thing I knew, I was writing a novel and I said to my mom, who was in California at the time, I think I want to publish this. And here we were. We were running with it.
That's always a wonderful thing. We find our writers, we don't always know where they get their writing inspiration from.
I had given up my writing because my ex-husband did not want me doing it. And so I gave it up to focus all of my time on my family, my husband and my children. And moving to Colorado, I only had one friend out here. She didn't have a whole lot of time because of her work schedule. And so I needed to do something. And I made the decision I needed to do something for me. Mm-hmm. Writing became my thing again. And there were some definite trials with that book because the program I was using originally lost the manuscript, not once, but twice. And I had to start 3 different times.
Nothing that we want that's going to be good ever comes easy.
Yeah.
If it comes easy, it's not worth having.
Exactly. And so I wrote that manuscript 3 times and then edited it 4 times with my mom. And it was the first time we had ever edited anything. My mom was an avid reader. And so we went through and we'd be on the phone together for hours all weekend editing chapters. And so it just kind of developed. And once I finished book 1, I started book 2 instantly. And that's where book 2 actually picks up right at the end of book 1. And between my mom and I, we really just went and ran with this entire series until my mom couldn't do it anymore.
I understand. My mother is my first beta reader. She reads my books before anyone else.
She was
yeah. So we understand our parents are usually our first readers for anything.
Yeah. I had people that I work with, they're going, your mom reads those types of scenes that you write. And it was one of those that we would have these open conversations and arguments some days about word usage, about which word is better in that place. And here we are.
Yeah. My mother is reading my young adult series and they're like, your mom reads young adult? Well, she's read my darker stories that I won't publish because they're like fan fiction and stuff like this, but that's my creative outlet. They're dark. But she'll take these and they're fun so you can relax to them.
My mom read all the way to book 4. She read through all 1 through 4 and went through editing. And book 3 is a darker book, and then book 4 is even darker. I went to a very dark place to write that book. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in the middle of fixing a section because we would edit together and then I would do one more read through to try to make sure we caught as much as we could and added a few details here and there. And I was going through a section and she comes up And at that point, I had left my ex-husband, and her and I were, she had moved to Colorado to be with me and my kids. And we were living in the same apartment, and I was working, and she goes, by the way, that scene. And I go, which one? And she goes, the snuff film. And I said, yeah. She goes, that was really good. I said, I don't know if I should say thank you or I'm sorry.
Oh goodness. I mean, but that's what our betas do, regardless if it's mom, it's best friend, whoever is our first readers. This is what they do. And they bring out that inspiration. They bring it out to the fullest, the darkest, the funniest, whatever we're going for in that scene.
There would be times where we would argue about certain word usage. Santiago is a 400-year-old vampire who is European. He's from Spain, and he's traveled all over Europe. And so he's very old European. He doesn't have certain words in his vocabulary. And so trying to always make sure when you're writing his character and staying in that voice is always a challenge. And so she was that person that would go, I think you lost them there. Let's change these words. And was the one that would point out, yeah, this isn't right. This is not how this should be worded. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a character, say from Australia or Austria-Hungary, they have very certain words that they say in their normal dialect. There's not English. It is English, but it's a different form than what we have.
Yes. And Santiago is very proper. He speaks very properly. He doesn't use words like can't and don't. He has a tendency to sometimes say my old friend or just use the word very. There is an old rule that says never use the word very, but old Europeans use that word. So it's, it's a little different. And so I have to always remember when I'm working with Santiago that he has a different cadence than everybody else in this series. And he has a different set of vocabulary as well in this than everybody else.
I mean, that's always good though. You have that one character that is different from everyone. And it's like, are they good? Are they evil? Are they mischievous? Are they friendly? They can be anything because they're completely the opposite from everyone else.
He is so proper, and he dresses so nicely. We very rarely see him out of his suits, and they're tailored to him. So we very rarely see him out of his suits. When we do, it's either to go into battle. And the only other time Savannah sees him out of that is when he is doing woodworking, because as a human, he did for a living. Still something that brings him peace. And so there's certain pieces of furniture in their house that is made by Santiago. And that's the only times we see him. And it's very few and far in between we see him out of his suit.
Exactly. I mean, they have their clothes that they wear every day. You have their personality. The females wear a certain necklace or earrings. It's what do they wear? It's what everything goes together in the books, and you have to build that layer by layer.
It's very challenging. I've had a lot of people tell me that I'm very good at world building. And I think part of the reason is because of who I've read. The authors I enjoy the most. I am a huge J.R. Ward fan, and she has built this extravagant world of these males in the Black Dagger Brotherhood. And same thing with Anne Rice. She did the same thing. So when I started this, I didn't know it was going to be a series. It started off as book one. And as soon as I finished book one, I knew what needed to happen next. And so book two happened. And at that point, I didn't know how many books that there were going to be until about halfway through book two. And at that point, I was going through so many personal changes, and I really just threw myself into this world and building everything and building these characters. and adding more characters. We have so many more characters than what we had in book 1 and book 5. There's so much more supporting cast, and we're starting to get deeper into those other characters and finding out more about them.
I love how you're using words that I associate with films, cast and scenes and characters. These are all film related.
Yeah, my brother's actually a producer, but Savannah is very real to me. She's there. I don't know. I'm not the one creating the story. She is. She tells me it. I put it on paper, and that's really how it works. Matthew, who is one of our main bad guys, he, when I'm writing and working with Matthew is always right here, and he's breathing at my neck, and it's a constant thing when I'm working on a scene with him. Mm-hmm. And he's through this whole series, but you don't see him all the time. So when he has book 4 was predominantly Matthew, and we spent a lot of time hunting him and finding more things out about him, including his real name. I spent a lot of time with him just breathing down my neck with Savannah on the other side of me.
Isn't that fun?
For me, Matthew is a very dark and very, very psychopathic individual. Mm-hmm. And we see in book 4 how far he's willing to go, or we think how far he's willing to go. I'm working currently on book 6, and we're going to get more of Matthew, and we're going to see how far he is willing to go to finish this. And how he feels he is in love with Savannah, and what he's willing to do to prove this. So he's always there. And writing this book 6 now, he hasn't shown himself, but I can feel his presence there with every page as I'm writing to get there.
Yeah, he's just not there yet. He's not ready to say, okay, I need to talk. And this is something that's with every author. We get so in tune to our characters. They're sitting right here, and we're just taking their dictation.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, and that's, they are a cast, because for me, they're real. They all live in my head, and they're always there. And some days, there was a day I went to go grab the mail from the mailbox, and I just gotten off work and had the kids from school, and my 13-year-old is sitting next to me, and all of a sudden I got something from one of them, and I said, here, and I threw my phone at her and made her open the notes. And I was like, Kate, this is what I need you to put in there. And she's dictating as I'm driving home, so that I wouldn't lose that piece of information.
Oh, I've done that so many times with my daughter.
And that's the world, my kids live in that world all the time with me. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I'm a librarian. I'm a part-time librarian. I'm working towards becoming the full-time librarian at my school. And I'm working on teaching my older grade levels how to be creative writing, and how this happens and how this builds, because it's not something we really teach in the classroom anymore. And so I've been doing this with my 4th and 5th graders, and they're really learning. And so even in that aspect, these people are with me even then, as I'm teaching these kids how this works.
Now that is a wonderful skill that you're teaching. I had this when we were in school. My daughter did not. And it's a skill that, thankfully, because she has me as a mother, she knows how to do. But it's a skill not many people understand anymore.
They don't. And so we're starting a new reading program. COVID has brought to us the fact that these kids are behind, and they don't have the reading skills that they should. And part of it is they don't have the imagination that they should. My daughter has been read to since I was pregnant with her. My son is the same. My son writes beautifully. Unfortunately, he hates it. But my daughter has always had this vivid imagination, and so has my son, because I've read to them their entire lives. And my poor son is one of my students. I'm his librarian, and some days he loves it, some days he doesn't. But the things that I did for them reading, I now get to do with other kids. And it's really exciting, because some of them didn't know how to hear character voices or how to picture something happening. And the one way I describe it to them is, when you're writing, you're painting a picture. They go to an art class. Well, how do you draw a picture? Okay, now you're going to do this with your words. It's the same concept, just using words instead of using a paintbrush or using crayons or colored pencils.
Right. And that's a skill that we have to start teaching again. We have seen a decline in all the arts because we're not being as creative as we used to 30 years ago.
Correct. And they all know I'm a writer outside of being their teacher. It's really interesting. They're going, "What's the name of your series?" And I'm like, you guys aren't old enough to read that, so you're not going to get to know that. But one day, and I know this will happen, some of these kids books, and I just hope that they're old enough to read them at that point. And the other part is that they remember what they learned from me. There are certain kids that you see there's a writer there, and they want to write, and they want to be able to do more creative stuff. But we're so stuck in this writing more informational stuff, informational papers, even in an elementary school level, that we're not really getting to have fun with writing. And so in the library, I'm getting to do that, where I get to show them how to have fun with it.
I mean, that's the one thing with writing. I hated it in school because it was all informational. I don't want to write informational. I don't like it. I'm not there. You give me something that's a creative writing. And
and here's the other thing. They don't have the skills to know how to structure things when it comes to writing creatively. And so I'm showing them that as well, and having fun doing it, because it's not something that they notice in books. When they get a book, they're not paying attention to those things. They're paying attention to what they're reading, but they're not seeing what they're reading. They're not hearing it. And that's a huge thing. I try to make sure when I'm writing, I am painting this picture so that you know exactly what they're feeling, exactly what's going on. In the beginning of book 2, there at the very beginning, Savannah has almost been raped, and in her own bed, and she escapes, and she gets the mail out of her home, and the next thing that happens is she throws up. And I wanted to make sure that you tasted what she was tasting when she threw up. And some people felt I went a little too far, because it was not a pleasant scene in that sense, but you knew exactly what she was feeling, and you knew exactly what she was tasting as it happened.
Exactly. You have to look at what age group you're writing for. If you're writing for an adult, and you're really 100% writing for 18 and over, you can go into more explicit, more graphic, more everything. Versus if you're writing for a young adult, you have to temper your wording, your verbiage, so you don't get all the details.
And the other one of the things my mom and I used to always argue about, what's the right word for certain scenes, because I don't believe in dumbing things down. Too many times I have read a book and I can't get through because it's dumbed it down so far. And my mom and I were having a discussion. I can't even tell you what the word was, but it was a word that maybe not a lot of people knew. And Santiago was speaking, and I said, "No, I think this is the right word." She goes, "Yeah, I think you're right." And my ex-husband overheard us, and he goes, "Well, people aren't going to know that word." And I said, "Well, they can look it up then." And he was shocked and couldn't believe I was like, "Really? They're going to look at?" I said, "That's not my problem." You only get better at your word usage by reading. I have had plenty of authors, Michael Conley being one of them, where I actually had to read a sentence 2 or 3 times going, I'm not sure I understand that word. And then I went and looked it up. And I'm not afraid of that.
Right. How many times as a reader am I reading a book and you have to reread the page or the paragraph or something to get the word to make sense because I'm lazy. I'm not going to go pick up a dictionary to Google the word. However, I will sit there and I reread what I'm reading until I understand what they were saying. Because you take the word and the contents that it is, and if you have a teacher that will teach you how to read context.
One of the things that for my third graders, we're talking a lot about word usage. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things that I'm trying to also teach. And I do it in my books too. There are, I don't do it all the time, but there are certain characters that are not going to use a simplified word. They're going to use a bigger word when they speak. And it's kind of one of those that it's required for the way they speak. Santiago is one of them. Hugo was one of them. They were very close. And Santiago, I am so sorry.
It's all right.
Somebody just tried to call me. Hugo and Santiago pretty much raises Hugo. And so he gives Hugo this education that he never had as a human. And because of that reason, they speak very eloquently and they don't dumb things down for others.
Right. I mean, you have.
So I don't feel.
Yeah. You go, okay, the room is cold. Well, describe cold. Is it frigid? Is it freezing? Is it, there's different words you use besides cold. I had my ex-husband, he never read any of my books, but
mine neither.
Yeah, my mom and I would discuss the books, and well, that just doesn't make sense. Well, it's a fantasy. It's not supposed to make sense. So, you have to use the words that the characters use. You have to stay in character, but at the same time, you have to be able to describe what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're tasting. It may not, it's beef. Well, if you go to another country, they might not have beef. They might have camel.
Yeah. My husband and I just got married, my second husband and I, and he reads everything I write. Now he has taken over where my mom has stopped. My mom passed away in October, and he has taken over all of my editing. And so he now gets to read everything, and he gets to now tell me if I've done a good enough job or not. And the nice thing is he worries very little about hurting my feelings, and he takes this role very seriously. So we work so well together because of that reason.
Yes. See, my fiance, he does the same thing. He reads, he'll tell me, and I'm like, be blunt. I'm not asking you as my fiance, as my better half. I'm asking you as, my guru. Be blunt.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what I tell him. Book 5 was a difficult writing because I did something I'd never done before. I bounced back and forth between Savannah and Santiago. The story has always been told by Savannah, but we needed to know Santiago's story, and we needed to know about his past. And to do so, we had to go see it through his eyes. And so book 5, Bad Memories, is all Santiago's book. And it bounces between both of them telling the story. And so we not only get to see Santiago's past, but we saw through Savannah's eyes how they fell in love. But now we got to see it through Santiago's as well.
That is a wonderful thing to get. And to be able to give your character that extra voice.
There was so much happening in that book, and it was leading to things that were connected to Santiago's past into his present. And the only way to do justice to that story was for Santiago to play a role in telling this story. It was a challenge, to say the least, because of who Santiago is, and going between the two characters, it did become difficult at times. And it's over a 500-page book. So,
Well, that happens when we get into a book and we just don't know where to end it.
I don't, one of my ARC readers, she calls my books Bibles. But it's, and I always tell her I have a lot to say. And I just finished writing for an anthology, which was a huge challenge for me because I never have a limit to how much I can say. And in this particular way, I actually had a limit.
Yeah,
and
most anthologies
that gave me a whole new challenge.
Yeah, for our listeners, an anthology usually is about 20,000 words.
This one is 10. I had 10,000 words, and it's not told from Savannah's point of view. It's told from our Irishman, Liam, who was part of the IRA as a young vampire. And he loses the love of his life through very bad choices by both of them. And he comes to find out the truth, and that there was more to it than he ever realized. And it ties into the rest of the series. I'm going to release it as a novella after the anthology has been released and been out for 3 months. So I will get to complete that story and add more to it. But 10,000 words, that was a difficult task.
Yeah,
because I have a lot to say.
Yeah, I have one of my authors that I publish. Their books are no less than 600 pages.
Mine are usually, the first one was my shortest, and they've grown exponentially from there. And once they just have continued to grow. This book 6 that I'm working on, it has no title as of yet. It is going to be a hearty book because of the fact that we're setting up for the final book of this series. And the way I thought the series was going to end, it turns out I was wrong. And it's changing the whole book for book 6. And I'm having to go, okay, I know how book 6 ends, but now that this has changed, it changes the entire ending of the series. And that is a whole new challenge now for me.
Yeah, I understand that because I wrote the first 4 books to my main series, beginning, middle, and end. I haven't released the 4th book, the final book, because I'm writing these spin-off series. And as I'm writing it, it's adding details that are needed in the final book.
I'm going to be finishing, once I finish book 6 and I add more for the novella and get those 2 out. My husband and I will be co-writing a series that is technically a spinoff from this one. It revolves in the same Hellborn world, but it is not dealing with Hellborns directly. They're actually demons, and Hellborns and humans don't realize that they exist, but they're not evil. They all play a role in the human and Hellborn life that no one is aware of.
That's going to be a very interesting spinoff. It's going to give a different dimension to the series that you're already
This one, and again, I was actually tutoring a friend of mine, her daughter, and I was tutoring her in creative writing, and we were working together, and I would give her free writes and make her do a writing prompt, and she'd have 5 minutes to write and get as much done as she possibly can. And I came across a writing prompt, and I was like, that's a really cool writing prompt. And here came one of my demon brothers, and I started writing it. And I started just the first page of the first chapter. And as soon as I did it, I went, this is not something I'm writing by myself. And I knew I needed a co-author. And I spent about 6 months trying to figure out who was going to do it. My mother actually introduced me to my husband. they were friends and neighbors. And he and I hit it off. And when we started dating, I said, you're the person that needs to be writing this other part of this book. And he said, okay. He didn't even think twice. He didn't bat an eye. So we'll be starting that soon enough, probably within a year. And that's going to be a completely different challenge. I've never co-written with anybody, so this is new, and I'm a control freak.
I've co-written one thing. It's not published, but it's between me and a couple other girls that wrote the story, and we haven't released it. We don't know if we are going to release it. It hasn't been decided yet, but at the same time, it's a very unique experience that I say all authors need once, regardless if you publish it or not. You need the experience once.
It's kind of like, I always tell people that you should take one peer review class. You should always take one creative writing class that has a peer review. And the reason being is because there is something to be learned from peer reviews, because reviews really are a reader's business, not a writer's business. Right. I try not to read my reviews because I can't make everybody happy. And so reading them will only make me want to do so, which takes away from what I'm doing.
Yes.
And so peer review teaches you that. It teaches you who you can, what you need to take from others and what you don't need.
Exactly. Now we are almost out of time. So where can our listeners and our viewers find you?
So I am on Facebook. I actually have a Facebook group with another author friend of mine. And it is called Penned in Magic and Forevers. I don't really use my author page anymore because I'm busy running my other book page. And that book page covers not just me, but my friend L.E., S.J. Dorn, who is a spectacular dark romance series that it's a co-author series, and they write spectacular. I'm friends with both of those guys, and many other authors appear on our page. Right now, unfortunately, I can't do any Facebook Lives. Facebook has shut me down on lives.
Of course.
Yeah, no, we're having fun. I went to go on to do one on New Year's Eve, and as soon as I signed on, they shut me down. I also do take friend requests on Facebook on my personal page because it is all about my writing. And that's under Sammantha O'Brien, which is my married name.
Awesome. It was so great having you on the show today.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. I had so much fun.
And for all of our listeners and our viewers, happy reading.